On that sharply hot July morning of 1964, a light veil of mist rose over the Hollywood hills. The noise of the city faded behind, while beyond the studio gates there was a different rush, a different excitement. A new film was about to begin shooting, and everyone was talking about one name. Elizabeth Taylor. A black Cadillac slowly approached the set entrance. The moment she stepped out of the car, it was as if the entire set held its breath. When the sunlight caught her hair, her violet eyes seemed to deepen for a brief moment. But within those eyes was a weariness, a fragility that no one would notice at first glance. That year had been filled with hospital visits, endless scandals, and a constant, hollow ache she could no longer hide. As she walked onto the set, everyone greeted her with warmth, perhaps a little too much warmth. Director Marcus Delton, a man nearing 60 with sharp eyes and a soul devoted to cinema, hurried through the crowd. He extended his hand, but behind his gaze was something different. Not just professional respect, something deeper, admiration, or maybe something beyond it. "Welcome, Elizabeth," he said in a low voice. "Today, a lot of things might change." Elizabeth seemed to understand the meaning behind his words, but offered no reply. Something else captured her attention, a newcomer on set. A young, talented, and quietly mysterious composer. No one even knew his name properly yet. People whispered rumors about him. "Who's the new guy?" The director brought him in personally. "I heard he'll be working closely with Elizabeth. Some scenes will match the rhythm of his music." When Elizabeth entered her dressing room, she found her small, leather-bound diary on her chair. The paragraphs she had written late the previous night still carried raw, emotional weight. Lately, the diary had been the only place she allowed herself to be honest. But something was wrong. The pages were slightly open, almost as if someone had leafed through them. She froze for a moment. She sensed the stolen glances among the crew, the way whispers seemed to follow her. Someone was trying to get into her private world, but she didn't show it. She took a deep breath and slipped the diary into her bag as preparations for the scene began. Elizabeth walked back through the dim hallway toward her dressing room to change costumes. Between the old posters hanging on the walls, one figure caught her, eyed out a young man, sitting at a piano, rehearsing. His fingers moved elegantly across the keys, the melody filling the air as naturally as breath. Elizabeth stopped without realizing it. The man lifted his head. Their eyes met, just for a second, and time seemed to slow. The melody stopped. He smiled gently. "I'm working on the music for your new film," he said. "My name is Thomas." Elizabeth didn't speak, but returned the smile. In that fleeting moment, the first spark of a coming storm may have been struck, but when she returned to her room that evening and opened her bag, her diary was gone. The moment Elizabeth realized her diary was missing, her knees nearly gave way. That small, leather-bound notebook didn't just hold memories. It held her fears, her vulnerabilities, and emotions she had never dared to say out loud. If those pages fell into the wrong hands, her career could shatter in an instant. Panic rose in her chest as she hurried back to her dressing room. She searched drawers, costume racks, under the makeup table, but it was gone. She paused, trying to piece together the last 24 hours. Then she remembered the final sentence she had written. "Today, I heard a melody, the first thing in a long time that actually touched my heart." Her first admission, her first tremor of feeling for Thomas. If anyone saw those lines, even someone who barely knew his name, they would sense something beginning and push until they uncovered it. When she returned to the set, everyone acted normal. But Elizabeth could now feel the slight differences hiding in the air. A few stagehands avoided her gaze, costume assistants whispered among themselves, and director Marcus stood far too close. "Is something wrong?" Marcus asked softly between scenes, stepping toward her. Elizabeth straightened her expression. "No, just tired." Marcus's eyes searched hers as though he could see through the words. "If you need anything, tell me. I'm here for you." That concern no longer felt professional. Elizabeth took a careful step back. Just then, the set doors opened. A tall man in a long coat walked in. No ID badge, but surveying the room with bold confidence. The moment the crew saw him, their faces tightened. It was journalist Daniel Rowe, one of Hollywood's most dangerous pens. A man who could smell a scandal miles away. He walked straight toward Elizabeth. "Good morning, Miss Taylor. I'm here for an interview about your new film." Elizabeth lifted an eyebrow. "We don't have an appointment." Daniel smiled coldly. The kind of smile a hunter gives prey he already cornered. Some stories don't wait for appointments. He handed her a folded note. Elizabeth felt her heartbeat stumble. She opened it and saw a few lines. "Music reveals everything. Be careful." No signature. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was unmistakable. Someone knew. Her eyes instinctively shifted to the corner where Thomas sat. He avoided her gaze, scribbling something quickly over his sheet music. For a fleeting moment, she wondered could it be him? But then her intuition pushed the thought away. No, those eyes could never play that kind of game. Daniel noticed her glance. "How are things with your new composer?" he asked. "There's a certain energy on set people are talking about." Elizabeth kept her voice steady. "He's just doing his job." "Interesting," Daniel murmured. "Last night, someone saw you speaking with him as you left the studio." Elizabeth froze. A cold wave washed through her. Someone was watching them. As the studio lights slowly flickered back to life, only one question remained pounding in her mind. Who took her diary and why? Tension on set grew even heavier the next morning. The sun had just risen. The studio doors had barely opened, yet inside the air felt thick, quiet, uneasy, expectant. Elizabeth hadn't slept at all. She kept replaying the same questions. Who took her diary? Who left that note? Why had the reporter suddenly appeared? When she entered the costume room, she saw a small envelope on the table. It was folded like the previous note, but this one was written on elegant stationery. Her fingers shook as she opened it. "It's only beautiful when you write. But now I'm the one who has to write. We talked for hours last night. They were watching us. Something is coming. Be careful. T." Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat. This was Thomas's handwriting, and the message mentioned a long conversation. Last night, but Elizabeth had been alone. If she hadn't spoken with him, who had Thomas spoken to? Or who had pretended to be her? Suddenly, the dressing room door swung open. Thomas stepped inside, pale and restless. "Elizabeth, we need to talk." Elizabeth hid the envelope. "Did you take my diary?" she asked directly. Thomas immediately lowered his eyes. "No, but I know who has it." Before she could respond, loud footsteps echoed through the hallway. Reporter Daniel Rowe entered with a security guard at his side. "Miss Taylor," he said calmly, "I believe you have something to tell us today." Elizabeth stepped back. "You're mistaken, Daniel. This is just a film set." Daniel smiled. "Of course it is, but set walls always talk." He reached into his bag and pulled something out. Elizabeth's diary. Her voice cracked with shock. "How? I didn't steal it," Daniel said, flipping through the pages. "Someone gave it to me." His eyes shifted to Thomas. Thomas flushed red, but did not look away. "I didn't give it to him," he insisted, but his voice trembled. Daniel opened to a page. "Do you know what it says here?" Elizabeth closed her eyes, bracing herself. Daniel read aloud. "Every time I see him, my breath changes. This feeling isn't a game. I must hide it. If I surrender, everything will fall apart." The entire set fell silent. Everyone's eyes turned to Elizabeth. In that frozen moment, Thomas stepped forward. "Those lines are about me," he said. Elizabeth stared at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about, Thomas?" The young composer didn't flinch. "That night, the person I spoke to wasn't you. But I was thinking of you. Every note I write is because of you. You don't know it, but I've been watching you for months." A shocked silence settled over the set. Even the background whispers died out completely. "I wrote those notes," Thomas continued in a trembling whisper. "I didn't take your diary, but I made copies of some pages. I was afraid of losing you. This feeling, it took control of me." The reporter scribbled every word like a man striking gold. Elizabeth stepped back, tears rising. "Thomas, what you've done is love," he said. "Mad, dangerous, hidden, misunderstood, but real love." The words echoed through the walls. No one dared breathe. Elizabeth's eyes filled with a storm of emotion. Anger, shock, sorrow, and a trace of something softer, all at once. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I'm just an actress. You're just a composer. This isn't a story. This would be a scandal." Daniel's cold smile widened. "And now, I have my story." Security stepped forward. Thomas turned one last time toward Elizabeth. "I just needed you to know. I truly loved you." Elizabeth couldn't speak, but as he was being led away, she whispered through the hush of the crowd, "Thomas, if only the time had been different." In that day, Hollywood's 1960s history gained a new headline. Elizabeth Taylor's secret on-set affair. Composer Thomas Hale and the diary scandal. The morning after the scandal broke, the studio looked like a battlefield. Doors were locked, production was temporarily halted, and security had been tripled. Director Marcus Delton was shouting into phones in frustration. Producers were trying to calm him down. But everyone knew this was only the beginning. Elizabeth sat alone in the makeup room. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, her under eyes were dark, her shoulders slumped. The iconic Hollywood poise she was known for had now transformed into a fragile silence. On the table lay a newspaper, not even in circulation yet, a special edition from Daniel Rowe. The headline read, "Elizabeth Taylor's Dark Set Romance. Her diary reveals all." The subheading was even more shocking. Young composer Thomas Hale had been copying the actress's private writings for weeks. Elizabeth dropped the newspaper, noticing her hands tremble. The door clicked softly. Marcus entered, his expression carrying disappointment more than anger. "Elizabeth, this has gotten out of control." "I know," Elizabeth said in a quiet voice. "But I didn't do anything." Marcus stepped closer. "That's the problem. You didn't do anything. Thomas has been obsessively fixated on you for weeks. You didn't notice." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Or rather, you noticed but chose to ignore it." Elizabeth lifted her head. The weight of that sentence sank into her chest. I thought it was just an artist being emotional." Marcus said, "I suspected it from the start. I didn't want Thomas on this project. But the producers, they want a young name. Something fresh. When I saw that first look between you two, I knew trouble was coming." Elizabeth's eyes widened. You heard that conversation that night?" "I did," Marcus replied. "Just a few words. But it was enough." Elizabeth felt a chill in her chest. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Because," he said slowly, "you needed to be happy. You hadn't smiled in months. Thomas's melodies, they brought you some life, even if just a little." Elizabeth couldn't speak. Images began flooding her mind. Thomas's eyes, the melodies, the first smile on the backstage, and now this scandal looming over all of it. At that moment, the door burst open. The head of security entered. "Miss Taylor, the outside of the studio is completely packed. Journalists, cameras, radio reporters, they're all here for you." Elizabeth shook her head. I can't speak to anyone right now." "You have to," said the security chief. "The producers want nothing more." Elizabeth walked toward the door, but noticed her legs trembling. She took a deep breath. Just as she reached for the doorknob, she thought of the dark corridor where Thomas had been taken. A weight pressed down on her chest. "There's something I need to tell you." She turned to Marcus. "Thomas wasn't a bad person. He paused. Just lonely." Marcus nodded. "Maybe. But loneliness can be the greatest danger." Elizabeth opened the door. The flashes hit her eyes. Hundreds of voices shouted her name at once. "Miss Taylor, did you have a relationship with Thomas? Is what's written in your diary true? Why did the young composer copy your writings? Did you love him? Will this film continue?" Each question felt like a bullet. Elizabeth paused. The uproar continued. Then she leaned toward the crowd. "Thomas Hale," she said, her voice trembling, "was never a part of my life." She stopped. "But for even a single moment, he changed the rhythm of my heart." The crowd froze. Flashes went off simultaneously. In that instant, Elizabeth realized this story was no longer just a scandal. It was the kind of Hollywood tragedy people try to forget. And that tragedy would live on with her name.